My friends, welcome back to the Courageous Pivot podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Telpner, and wow, do I have a show for you today. Before we get there, I want to please ask and remind you to subscribe to the podcast at courageouspivot.com. That way you'll get an email in your inbox when we drop a new episode, any special offers, all kinds of new things that we're, cooking up over here. And also, I like to know you're there. Now, today's guest is my friend Catherine Choi. We met, 5 or 6 years ago now when we both joined the same entrepreneurship group. Her story is wild. Talk about a courageous life. In this conversation, we talk about her overcoming her addiction to heroin, her career in banking, transitioning to her life as an entrepreneur, founding the company SoYoung, which made the best kids' lunch bags, backpacks, diaper bags, tote bags for women, the cosmetic bags. The line grew and grew and grew until she realized it just wasn't it anymore. She talks about the pivotal moment when she climbed a volcano and so much in her life had to be let go of after that. Catherine is a beautiful, warm, super soul, and I trust that you will take a lot away from this conversation. Enjoy the show. Hello, Catherine. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for so long because you did something with your business that very few people do. And we're going to get to all of that. But, I asked you before we started recording, I'm like, how are you? And you're like, that's a loaded question. So I have a feeling we're going to have a great conversation today.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to ask you first, you started your business later. Like how would you describe your first life as an adult or a young adult?
I would say that up until the age of 27, my life, I would say that part of my life was one where it was rooted in a lot of fear and a lot of safety, just safety as the lens through which life should be navigated. And that was, from a childhood and parents who grew up in the war, my dad from North Korea, both parents having survived the war, and my dad having escaped North Korea, and, by a series of huge miracles actually ending up in Montreal, which is where I was born. And there was a lot of fallout from that, including, alcoholism, a very abusive childhood. And so I would say that my parents really just their whole, focus as parents were to try and keep us safe. But, within the confines of like also control and, domination and, my father, I'm talking about more, this patriarchal kind of view of, myself, my sister, my mother to a degree as property, really, that he could control. And so, yeah.
What happened at 27?
At age 27 is when I got clean from a 4-year heroin addiction, which I'm not sure if you were aware of.
I did not. Okay, we're going to back up that train a minute. When you said alcoholism,
Yes.
I know that's part of your story.
Well, alcoholism was part of my father's story.
Oh,
I would
okay.
say that, I could throw alcoholism into my addiction story too, but really it was a heroin addiction that, yes.
How did you find that's like every parent's nightmare.
Yeah.
How did it find you, or or what
Yeah.
you sought it out?
So it was a complete backfire of exactly what my parents were trying to avoid for me, right? Which was that, my entire child and into my adult life, I moved out of my parents' home at age 22 or something like that, because my father would not allow my sister and I the freedom to go away for university. My dad insisted that we live at home and go. I went to McGill University, and I didn't have your childhood, like your standard childhood of, having freedom and going out with your friends on weekends. And like, it was a very, very controlled environment in which even at university age, I had very little personal freedom. My father would once in a while let my sister and I, go out to like a dance, let's say, but we had to be home, at a certain time. And it was really a very constrained experience. And so I never had the freedom to make choices and to make mistakes without massive consequences and a lot of fear. And so at age 22, when I finally moved out, and, it was under this series of circumstances that happened, which was, I had a boyfriend that I met in university that my parents denied the existence of him, right? Like they just didn't want to know. They just acted as if like it was like, you can have a boyfriend, but you have to still work within our rules. So like, I just sneak around and like, he just was not part of the story, and, they denied it. And so I had this boyfriend who I met in university, and, we graduated, and after university, I started working for a bank as a teller. And, my boyfriend started saying like, let's move in together. And I was like, there's absolutely no way. My parents are never going to let me move out. But my sister had already flown the coop. She had decided that she wanted to become a Montessori teacher, and the training was in Toronto. And so she got out, and she was in Toronto, and I was the only one left at home. And when I asked initially if I could move out, and of course I didn't say I was moving out with my boyfriend, it was I'm moving out with my girlfriend. At first it was a hard no, but what I said to my mother, who was, much more supportive, but she still couldn't stand up to my father, was that I was going to move to Toronto to be with my sister. And so in the face of losing both of his daughters, my father finally relented and he let me move out. And then I moved in, not just with my girlfriend, but with her boyfriend and my boyfriend. So there were 4 of us. And I made this decision that I was going to do everything that I missed out on, that I was going to party like there was no tomorrow. And I'm not really a partier, like per se, right? But, whatever it was that I thought that I missed out on, I was just going to say yes to everything. And, that led to this terrible combination of someone who was never given kind of the freedom to make choices and learn to trust myself, basically saying yes to things that I shouldn't say yes to. And I ended up, my first drug that I ever did was heroin. Yes. And I didn't actually even, I was pretty sure, but I wasn't 100% sure that it was heroin because it was called smack. And it wasn't like, right off the bat, a IV, situation. It was, a different delivery method that seemed harmless, right? And it wasn't harmless, And fast forward, within 3 months, I would say, of moving out of my parents' home, maybe a little bit longer, I found myself in a situation where I was physically addicted to this substance. After having this moment, so I should talk about this moment, which was at first it was fun and games, and it was like Friday nights. Finally, I get to have fun weekends, and we'd hang out with our roommates and whoever else, and my roommates were pot smokers, and my boyfriend had a friend from high school who hadn't, continued his education beyond that point. And he had a habit. He was a junkie, and he lived at home with his parents and had to find places to use his drugs in secret, like the car or the basement. And so he was really happy that he had this place he could go to. And so he freely shared his drugs. And so that's how it all started to come together. And I remember on weekends kind of skipping home to like, my Fridays. And one weekend we were just getting ready to, start. And I'm sitting around the table. There's 5 of us. And I'm looking at my roommate, the girl, and she was a someone who I'd gone to university with in the same program. And I remember feeling very resentful towards her, thinking, oh God, I wish she wasn't here. I can't stand her. That's the talk that was going on in my head. Like, she's so messy. And I was closer with her boyfriend than I was with her. And there were issues. Anyways, all this stuff, all this judgment was happening in my head. And then they passed me, it was my turn to take a toke. And basically, I hope it's okay, I'm using all this language. But I basically took one inhale and I had this experience that changed me forever. And it was this experience of everything just going silent. And it was the most profound, beautiful experience of love and wholeness and completeness, and I call that now a God experience, right? And I do believe I had a God experience in that moment. And it was the first time in my entire life that I actually felt whole. And I remember just, looking around, and it was like literally 10 seconds later. And I look at my roommate who I had all these judgments of. And when I looked at her, all I could feel was like just so much love towards her. And that was the turning point for me, where it became like, oh, this is so much fun, to like, I need this. And so, shortly after that, the usage increased, to both days on the weekends, and then all 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then eventually, I went to work high and then never went back to work not high. And within, a short period of time, the body adapts, right? And I found myself in a situation where I would wake up in the morning and I would be sick if I didn't have it. And so hence started a 3.5-year nightmare where, my life just descended, and I became, from someone who was like, hardworking and always on time and responsible, to like this disaster on wheels, and, over the course of 3.5 years, like the characters, who entered the picture, and, the things that I did in order to be able to afford this habit, really, it just showed me like, anyone can do anything.
Yeah.
And, by the end of my addiction, or the end of, when I hit my bottom, basically my boyfriend, who at that point, through another series of craziness, was running an escort agency out of our apartment and cheating on me with one of the escorts. And he was clean, though. He had gotten clean. I was still using in secret. And I was skimming money off the top of my father's investments, which he had entrusted me with power of attorney, because I had this financial background. And, I was like, I was able to basically do all of these things that were illegal to kind of just, hide the fact that I was taking money from him. And I had made this decision that if my father, who was the scariest person in the world to me, if he ever found out, my plan was that I was just going to kill myself. And that was the plan. And every night, I could manage the days pretending that my life wasn't as terrible as it really was. But at nighttime, it was like the descending into the reality of like, how is this my life? And the only thing I cared about was whether my father found out about the money. And so every night I would just pray myself to sleep, saying like, please God, please, like whatever happens, please don't let him find out about the money. And that was like kind of the thing, right? And then one day he found out about the money, of course, right? And, I mean, this is a long story, but the point that I would say that carries into the present is that I had this experience of divine intervention, is what I call it, right? When I finally hit my bottom, and basically, I finally, like, the bottom fell out from my life. Everybody knew. My sister knew. My sister was the one who helped me. And she got me into a detox center in Montreal. And, I was convinced that it was all for nothing. I was convinced that this thing was stronger than me. Like, I wanted to stop from the first 3 months of my addiction. And every single day, I woke up with the resolve that I was going to be clean from that day forward. And like within minutes to an hour, like, my resolve, it was so much stronger than me, which is why I thought, I'm going to die an addict, right? There's no way that I can do this. And, but because everything fell apart, I had to agree to something. And so I agreed to go to this detox center in Montreal, thinking, once I get out of the detox, before I go to a treatment center, I'm going to figure out some way that I can get high. Like, that's, my mind was already there, right? And instead, what happened was, the minute I walked into this detox center in East End, Montreal, it was like this feeling of familiarity. It was like home. And I'd never been there. I'd never even been to that side of town. It's kind of like the equivalent of Jane and Finch, right? And, the East End is very, very French. And I walked in and it was very no frills, but I made almost instantaneously a friend. And I don't even remember. We just started talking, and he was English speaking, the only other English speaking person there, and the only other person there who was there for heroin. And he'd been there already for a week, which meant that he'd gone through the worst of it, right? And he'd also been there 2 months before that, because he'd gone through it and then relapsed and came back. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he was like, okay, so tonight what's going to happen is the nurse will come, you will get a cocktail of pills, because it was a medical detox, right? And he said, do not let anyone try and switch pills with you or anything. Just take all your pills, and then you're going to lie down, and they're going to taper you off your pills like every 12 hours. And in 3 days, you'll be off, and the worst of it will be over, and I'll see you in 3 days, right? And so all of that happens, and I lie down. And what happens is, the next 3 days pass like a dream. I don't remember it. And I remember little bits and pieces of it, but it was almost like I was lifted above the experience. And the morning of the 4th day, I opened my eyes, and it was really early, but the sun was out and everyone else was sleeping, and it was really quiet. And I remember thinking, like, I feel different. And I couldn't figure out why I felt different, right? And it took me a while to realize that I didn't have that monkey on my back going, you got to go get high. You got to figure out how you're going to use. And it was like, oh, that's interesting, right? And so I thought, okay, well, it's probably going to come at some point. And I was prepared for cravings, right? And instead, when I asked myself, like, what do I need right now? The only thing I could come up with is like, oh, I would love a hot bath, right? And so I went to this decrepit bathroom and like scrubbed the tub with Ajax and like got myself in the bath. And it was like the most amazing bath, right? And the next day, same thing, right? I didn't have that feeling. The next day, the same thing. And, over the course of the 2 weeks, nothing. And so even though all of that kind of seemed kind of interesting, I was still like not really understanding what was happening. And, I also went along with the rest of the plan, right? And so from treatment, I went from Montreal and I moved to Toronto, and I came to Toronto for treatment.
Is this when are you at 27 years old at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And basically, I ended up going to treatment for 3 months, 90 days residential. And during that period, it was kind of like camp for adults who were like recovering. It was the best thing ever. Like, it was like getting a break from your life, where all you do is therapy and 12-step meetings, and you focus on yourself. And during that time, I met dozens of people who were struggling. They were struggling with cravings, with alcohol withdrawal, with drug withdrawal, relapsing. And I didn't have it, right? And I thought, this is weird. And then I went into, I graduated from that, and I went into the 12-step program. And I went to meetings over the course of 10 years, and I met hundreds and thousands of addicts. And a lot of them struggled, right? Like the vast majority, I would say. And when someone would ask me like, how did you do it? I would be like, I don't know. I didn't do it. Just don't have it. Like I don't have it. And it never came back.
Hmm.
And so I started to understand at some point that I was given a gift. And I didn't understand why I got this gift and why other people didn't get this gift. And I felt guilty about it. And over the course of many years, what happened was my life normalized. Actually, within a year, my life was normalized. I got a job. I found, I was in a relationship. I started to just become a normal member of society again, right? And I was still in this recovery. And it was actually a huge part of my life for many years. But then, I eventually met my husband and we started having kids, and it just became a part of my life that I forgot about almost, right?
What happened when your father found out? Like, not
Yeah.
just about the money, but where it went.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a massive, massive, I guess, conflict and trauma.
Yeah.
But what happened actually was that initially, I guess it was the first time in his life where he had no answers.
Mm.
Well, he did have one answer, and my sister was like, no. But the answer he had was, we're going to lock her in the basement, and I'm not going to let her out.
Right.
Right? And she was like, no.
And so your parents were financially supported the programs you went into? Were they?
Yes. And lucky for me, at the time, for some reason, there was a huge subsidy benefit for Quebec residents going to treatment in Ontario. And so it paid for 75%
Right.
of my treatment. I don't know if that exists anymore, but yeah.
And how long after your recovery did you meet your husband?
Oh, a number of 3 or 4 years. Yes.
And
yes.
how many dates in before you told him?
Oh, we met in recovery.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
honestly, it would have been the first date because I was very open about it.
Yeah. And so what did you do for work at that point?
I went back I had been in banking, then I moved into financial software even before I got clean. And so I went back into banking and I worked for Scotiabank as it was more in the kind of systems area. So I was like an analyst, a business analyst. Yeah.
And you were working at Scotiabank when you have 3 children? 3?
I have 3 children, but no, I wasn't working there anymore.
Okay.
I had started to undergo what it was the beginning of what I call kind of my healing journey. I mean, my healing journey started when I got clean, right? Yeah. And the 12-step program is a spiritual path. And that always resonated with me even before the 12 steps. So it aligned with what I believed without even knowing that what I believed was,
right.
Spiritual path.
Do you continue going to meetings now?
I don't actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because, most or many people who are in recovery, it's a lifelong path. I hit a point in 12th step where I wanted more because what I saw was, there's this, I want to be very careful here because for someone who's newly in recovery or someone who's actively in addiction, I would say 100% 12 step. That is the answer for a long time. But what 12 steps doesn't address is trauma in the body. And so it's very much in the mind and it's continuous, daily renewal, once an addict, always an addict. There is no solution beyond, you take this medicine every day for the rest of your life. And what I found was that, yes, you can be freed of your substance addiction, but to be truly free is a completely different story. And what I found was that I got to a point where I looked around the room and I was like, I want more than what these people have. And I know there's answers and I don't know what they are. And I kept looking. And that was just the way I was anyways. I just kept looking for myself because even though the desire to use drugs never came back, what came back after a year was this deep, deep sense of inadequacy. And I was in a lot of emotional pain, the same emotional pain that I had grown up with. And I wanted peace. And I wasn't going to stop until I found that peace. And so that's what kind of was like continuously had me always going. Like, if someone, first I went traditional, with therapy and all that stuff. But then beyond that, if anyone said, oh, I tried this Reiki session, I tried this energy healing, I tried this, I'd be like, who did you go to? I want to try it. Right. And because I think I was open to that and curious, it's led me down an incredible path, right,
Mm-hmm.
of true healing and transformation.
What have you found has been most lasting or impactful for you in
Yeah.
providing or giving you that channel towards that sense of peace?
So my foundation is meditation. And I would say, but beyond that, when I wanted to do the work of healing the trauma in the body and the nervous system work, psychedelic medicine, which is what is controversial,
That's
right?
what I was going to ask you about that, because it's
Yes.
it's very popular and it's very trendy, and it's very trendy now among entrepreneurs for
Right.
sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know some who have history of addiction who do not touch a thing, like
Yes.
will not.
Yeah.
And so for you, you didn't feel like, do you have a fear that
No,
no.
no, because the first psychedelic that I ever experienced was ayahuasca. And it was, I mean, I've never gone back. And no one in their right mind would ever have an addiction issue with ayahuasca. And that was to me, a very different um, kind of reason for it was the pursuit of truth, and it was the pursuit of love, and something that I felt I had at that point in my life. I was 20 years clean, you know, and I knew, and this is where it's controversial. I actually don't believe that I would never touch, I would never touch like, heroin or cocaine or anything like that if it ever crossed my path. Partly because it has no interest to me anymore, right? Like, why would I ever do something like that, which I consider to be really low vibe? But, and I don't drink, but I do believe that I could if I really wanted to, but I just don't play with that because I know that it would cause a lot of concern for a lot of people. And other than that, I consider that there's high vibe, and it has to do with intentions, right? And, so that includes the healing medicines, the plant medicines like psilocybin. And, even though MDMA is not a plant medicine per se, I can tell you that the most profound healing journey I ever had was when I did MDMA, even more so than ayahuasca, I would say. So I know from true embodied experience of what peace feels like in the body, what it feels like to be okay in your skin, and to understand that this is possible for us from a place of being in a body that was in so much pain, right? And, not to say that I'm always there, but it's a touchstone for me. Once you experience it, you know how to get back there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what psychedelics have shown me, and meditation also has shown me.
Are you able to get back there without the psychedelics now?
I am able to get back there, and it has a lot to do with resonance, right? And getting into your heart, right? And I know that you're a heart math person, and it's funny. I did dabble in heart math initially, and then the meditation teacher I follow is Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I was actually talking about this morning. Initially, when I did his work, he was always talking about opening your heart, and I didn't know what he meant, right? And so I do the meditations, and and they were profound, but the first experience I had of having my heart like blown open was at a retreat that I went on, one of his retreats, and we did a walking meditation. And at the end of the meditation, I just remember we were like, all these people were outside and you have your headphones on. And I just had this experience of like standing there, bawling my eyes out. And and it was beautiful. It was like everything and all at once, right? It wasn't like it was sad. It was like sad and happy and joyful and like everything. And it was like the experience of being alive, right? And I think that that has been my journey, as been from someone who didn't understand because, you know, I was so shut down, right, from a young age, that I didn't understand there was so much more to life than just being safe,
Mm.
right? Because being safe is numb, right? And that was a lot of my experience, even after I got clean and I had my children, there was this barrier that I couldn't cross. I couldn't access beyond a certain point, like this feeling of happiness or pleasure even, right? And I'd be with my children, but it was always like this, like as much as I love them, I never felt that it was fun or pleasurable, you know? And I knew there was something wrong, right?
How your oldest is away at school now?
My two oldest,
Two
yeah.
now. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like you see like little bits and pieces of people's
Right.
lives.
Yeah.
Um, how were you with them leaving, given your experience in leaving? Obviously, you're a different parent than you
Yeah.
had. Was there fear?
No, in actual fact, there was kind of jealousy. Because, of course it was like the especially my oldest, like the year before he left was like this grieving year, right? It was like, oh my God, next year he's not going to be here. And I just like, it was so hard. But I did have a friend of mine who I spoke to a year before, and she was like, you're going to see, it's so good because they don't appreciate you until they go away. And then they come back and she's like, my kids appreciate me so much more now. And like the meals that I make them. And I was like, okay, well, there's something, right? And, I have really found that to be true. But the other thing was that, in a very, like we're talking in less than a week of after starting, at Dal, which is where my oldest one went, I could hear how much fun he was having. I could hear like he landed. And because I knew he'd landed and, we'd gone through this really heavy pandemic where, there was like months and weeks of him just holed up in his room and just coming down for meals and like playing video games. And it was just like so bad, right? That the fact that he was off having fun with his friends and playing soccer and like doing all those things, it was so much better. I was so happy for him, right? And same with my younger son. They both have had these amazing experiences of first year and beyond, right? And yeah, I feel like I wish I had had that, but
Were you open with them about your history?
oh, yes. Okay. So if we circle back to this whole question of why did I get this gift and, my business, which I eventually started when actually I had the idea initially for my business when my oldest son was 7 months old. And, it took 4 years to get to market. I had my second child very shortly after that. And so really it wasn't until I had my daughter, that the business actually became something more than just a project, right? And it started to kind of grow. And basically, that was in around 2010. So a long time ago still. And basically, the business was this private challenge to myself. I had this idea for a product that I felt the world needed, and it was this light bulb moment I had of, I'm going to design this diaper bag, which was my first product. And I had no idea. I wasn't crafty, didn't know anything about design, didn't know anything about business, but it was like, I had this idea that lit up my heart. And
Mhm.
back then I didn't have that language, but it was like my heart lit up and a window kind of opened, for me saying like, are you going to jump or are you not? right? And somehow I knew that if I held back and was like, yeah, but I've never done anything like this. I don't know how to do this. Like, how am I going to do this? And like all those questions, that window would just be like, okay, you know? And so I was like, yes. And I jumped. And from that point forward, you know, it really was this like, okay, you know, this is probably not going to work. But I also knew that it was related to me and the feelings of unworthiness and inadequacy. And like by saying yes to it and just like continuously just pushing it forward, I was saying no to that part of me that just kept saying, you can't do this. You're not worthy of this. You'll never be able. And part of me was like, I'm not listening to that voice. I'm just going to keep pushing this forward until I get to that point. And I will get to that point where it's like, okay, I'm out of steps. I did everything I could and it didn't work, but good for you. You didn't give up. And that was really what the business was going to be. And instead, what happened was it just kept inching forward and inching forward. And I felt the whole time like this imposter. I had no idea what I was doing. And, you know, but it even though it felt like a house of cards that could like just fall at any moment, I would look back and go like, you know, I did a lot of things that I never thought I could do, you know? But then I'd always look forward and go like, oh, but there's that thing. Like I could never do that thing. And then I'd do that thing, right?
Yeah.
But then there was something else. And ultimately, one day, years in, I realized, you know, I'm not the same person who started this business. I'm transforming, even though I still feel inadequate and I still feel all those feelings, right? And I was like, this is really interesting. I actually want to talk about this. And how do I talk about this in the context of my consumer products brand, right? And so it was percolating. And that was around the same time that I started meditating, that I had found Dr. Joe. I was meditating. And, you know, Dr. Joe has you really kind of work on, you know, the life you want to create for yourself. Right. And so there was the life I wanted to create for myself, which was kind of ego based, right? It was like, I want this successful scale, like, you know, business that, you know, is on the, what was that podcast that was how I built this podcast.
Love that
right?
show. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I've totally lost interest in it. But you know, that to me was like, somehow my ego was like, if you can do those things, then you are worthy. Right. And then there was the part of me, which I now know is more like it's the real part of me, which was like that part of me that asked the question, why did I get this gift? You know? And so I had this desire that was kind of bubbling up to the surface of wanting to share the truth, because people had started, you know, my products were visible, you know, they were in lots of retail stores.
I just want to talk. So your products, you started with the diaper bag.
Yes.
You had lunch bags, like grown up, beautiful lunch bags, sophisticated.
Kids to start, kids lunch boxes.
Okay.
And then eventually into adult women's lunch bags,
right?
And backpacks and tote bags. And so it was a lifestyle bag brand.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was beautiful. And the first school my son was at is preschool. I remember, and I just met you like not long before that. And I remember going in and it was just a wall of the SoYoung backpacks. Like everyone had them because they were natural fibers and they had no coatings on them. There's no chemical coatings on them, which most bags are synthetic and then covered in Teflon or whatever. So you were creating this like beautiful, well-made, durable line of products that were for sale. I mean, here in Toronto, everywhere.
Yeah. They were, you know, honestly, they were in North America, you know, and I had visibility in stores like Indigo and Whole Foods and eventually Anthropology. And, you know, many of those, like those beautiful specialty stores, right?
And so when you got your first purchase orders from Whole Foods and from Anthropology, at that point, were you still like, I'm an imposter, I don't even know how to make this happen?
Yeah. 100%, because it's not as it appears, right?
Of course. So nothing in entrepreneurship is ever as it appears, but we just keep selling it because we're really good at selling. That's what we do.
exactly. And, back to the whole point of the Dr. Joe, like having him like encourage you to like, really, really like visualize and create the life that you desire. The business part of my vision, actually, like we had to create these mind movies that we would watch as we meditated at his retreats. And I had these slides where I specifically had a storefront image of Whole Foods, and I had a storefront image of Anthropology, and I had a storefront image of Indigo. And within a year, I was in all of those stores. But like I said, it's not as it appears. And just being in those stores came with a whole host of other problems, right? And it was like, be careful what you wish for, right? Because you think you want these things, but really, like, that's not coming from the heart. That's coming
Mm-hmm.
from the ego, right? And, that's different. And then there was the thing that was coming from my heart, which is like, I really want to share this story and I don't know how. And then we got knocked off by this big brand, Kate Spade. They knocked off one of our products. And it forced me to ask the question of, as a completely neutral consumer who doesn't know me, doesn't know my story, why would someone look at my product and Kate Spade's product, and aside from take away like the art, the visual, would anyone say like, I prefer what this brand stands for over this one? And there was very, very little that would cause someone to do so, right? And here I was feeling like I have something to share. And I know that people can respond, what would resonate with this whole sense of inadequacy and unworthiness, because it's a universal feeling, even though it feels very individual. And so that's when I made the decision that I know actually where to start this story. And this story starts at the beginning of this divine intervention that I had, and telling the story of my heroin addiction and the story of how I got clean. Right. And so part of me, was like, really, am I really going to share that story publicly on my children's lunchbox website? But it was like this deep calling. And so I decided to do it. And it took me 6 months to actually launch it. It took me, actually the story got written very quickly, but then I started sharing it, in small groups with people who didn't know. And the one that made me decide that I needed to do this was, I belonged to a small mastermind group that met monthly. And we had met for a couple years, and we knew, each other quite well. Only one person knew my story and the rest of them didn't. And so I showed up one day and I was like, guys, I have a story to share with you. And I basically shared the entire story, and they were just like blown away, right? They were like, what? Like you? But what was even more interesting was the next day I get an email from one of the women in the group. And she asked me to go for lunch. And we were friends, but we weren't like friends outside of the group. And the one thing I knew about her was that she was a widow, and she was a young widow. And she had lost her husband, and she would refer to, when he was ill. So I assumed that he had died of an illness, and I never asked, and she never offered. And over lunch, we ended up talking about what happened with her husband. And she shared with me the most like heart-wrenching details of this very, very long, drawn out passing of her husband that involved addiction. And I was so blown away, because I realized that she was sharing it with me because I'd shared my story. Right. And it was such an honor to hold that for someone else, right? Someone I didn't know that well. And that was the first sign for me that I was like, I understand now why I had that, like why sharing this story is important. And so that's what prompted me to go public. And I posted it on my website, and then we shared it on social media, and we got this massive outpouring of support and response. But the thing that was the most meaningful was how people started sharing things that you would never imagine that they would share on social media, right?
Yeah.
Like incest and like it was just like unbelievable to me how it just was like people were dying to share, but they didn't have a way to share. And that's when I realized, like, this is so much more meaningful for me and so much more fulfilling than like making a sale,
Yeah.
And so that's when the divide started in my heart, right?
Between continuing to run your company and
Yes.
a different calling.
Yes. But it was a long and winding path to get.
I know this long and winding
Yes.
path, um, because it's like the side effect of opening your heart and getting in tune to it, to hear it, that not everything's going to survive.
Yeah.
Not everything in your life is going to take the journey with you. And that's sort of
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing. And also the challenges that come with it is the costs. So what gets left behind.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
And so fast forward,
Yeah.
you ultimately, after how many years did you choose to shut the doors?
So that happened in 2018. In 2024, so last year, was when I made the final decision that it was over. I had to do it in degrees.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, the truth is, it was a process of not just like, because my business, when I shared my story, was at its height.
Yeah.
And it started to do that scale thing. And, for the first time, like, it was like, holy shit, it's happening. It's happening. And I do recall there was a moment in the first quarter of 2020 where we had these massive projections for the year and even more massive projection for next year. And I felt so out of my league with the kinds of decisions that I had to make. I was like, how do I do this? I don't know how to do this. And I didn't have the right team. And like everyone was looking at me to make these decisions. And I was just kind of like, I picked this, and like I had no idea how to do this. And it wasn't that, if I felt like this was what I was meant to do in this world, it would be different. But that's where it really came clear to me of like, I don't even really want to do this. Like I thought I did, but I don't want this. This actually, I feel very trapped, and how am I going to now make this stop? And then I didn't have to make it stop because March of 2020, everything came crashing down. Right. And then I went into survival mode with my business where I was like trying to like grasp it, like trying to keep what I had, and, even though I had this thing that I had just kind of started to bloom, I had to kind of put that on the side so that I could put my energy towards saving my business. And the idea was always like, okay, first I'm going to save it and then I'm going to go back to this thing. Right. Yeah. And for years, I kind of limped along that way and I kept throwing money at the problem. And, it was like this thing where my heart wasn't in it anymore, but I felt I had no choice, And so much of my time and energy went into something that was destined. Like life was just saying, it's over, it's over, it's over. And I was like, no, it's not over. And I'd like sink my nails into it deeper.
It's not over till I say it's over, even though all the signs are there.
Yes. And so, it just had to get worse before it got better. And it got way worse. It got way, way worse. And I hired somebody to come in and do it for me. And then it ended up becoming a disaster, like where my business stopped making money. Then it started losing money like crazy. Right. Yeah.
Would there have been by the end, like, had you considered selling it? Like, cause it's a commodity product.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, if it didn't connect for everyone, like lunch bags and backpacks weren't selling when no one was going to work or to school.
100%.
And then all the small businesses were not open that were selling it.
Yes.
So did you ever consider selling what was left of it?
I did, but I didn't really have, I talked to a few people about like, how does one do that? Like I didn't have people knocking on my door. And, I think the idea was, well, you can't sell a sinking ship. So you have to get it back to a certain place in order to sell it. Yeah. And that was the whole thing. Like I have to get it back and that, as we, this whole thing is layered with I was still on my healing path too. So I
Yeah.
was still meditating, and I was also, you know, diving deeper and deeper into the psychedelic medicine. And there was a lot of things happening on different layers for me. But the biggest, most transformational decision and action that I took was something called me to sign up to do this 20,000-foot volcano climb in Ecuador with, our mutual friend who runs these entrepreneur adventures. And it was like, I've never done anything like that, right? Like I've always been into fitness and sports, but like not sports, just fitness, personal fitness, going to the gym, but I never did anything competitive. And yet it was like this beacon that was calling me. And so I decided to sign up for this climb, and it involved altitude. So you had to train, like you couldn't just show up and try this thing. You had to train 3 months ahead. And part of me didn't realize when I signed up, like what it was, right? And then when I learned what it actually was, I was like, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake.
You know what's funny is because I would get the emails about these trips, and like I've gotten soft in my old age, and I'm like, that sounds like a terrible thing. There is no part of me that wants to experience that discomfort. I've got
Yeah.
enough growth in my life right now.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel that way now, right? But I'm very clear that this was life show. Like it was
Yeah.
just like I needed to do this.
When
Right?
was this?
This was almost 2 years ago to the day.
Okay.
So we climbed on the last day of February and summited on the first day of March 2 years ago. And fast forward, like I went through the training, never thought that I would actually summit, but it was the exercise of going through it that was very empowering, right? And the volcano climb itself, after a week of doing many, many other things, was this experience that I had of what I now realize is like true embodiment, right? And I didn't also know what embodiment meant for a long time. But what happened was, you start this climb in the dark at midnight, and because you have to summit before you're very close to the equator, and you have to summit before it gets too hot and everything starts to melt.
This already sounds terrible. Go on.
Yeah, it is terrible. So you're like stuffed full of like carby foods, and then you're told to try and sleep, but you can't sleep because it's freezing and you have to do this thing, right? So you wake up and you haven't slept, but then you start trudging up this volcano that's very steep, very slippery, and within 10 minutes I couldn't I was just like not able to keep up. And I was like dying within 10 minutes thinking, I can't do this. This is too hard. Like, how am I going to do this? Right. And so every part of me was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And like thinking like, I'm going to have to stop. Right. But basically what happened was I was partnered up, and, we were told 2 days prior to that, be careful who you partner up with, because you get one guide for 2 people. And if one person turns around, your partner's turning around.
Right.
And so I had been whining a lot about like, I don't know if I could do this. And so I wasn't like the most optimal partner choice. And so when I had asked my friend if she'd be my partner, she's like, yes, but I have to tell you, like my will to summit is a 9 out of 10. And because I'm such a people pleaser, right? I remember thinking like, oh shit, I cannot let her down. I cannot let this person not have what she wants. And so quite honestly, people pleasing but got me up 7/8 of that mountain. Like the first 7 hours, I was dying, right? And the talk in my head was like, I hate this. I hate this. Why did I like? It was just like, this is so hard. And I was begging for her to like, because she was having a hard time too. And she'd turn around and go, how are you doing, Catherine? I'm like, okay. And in my head, I'd be like, please say you want to turn around, right? And she's like, maybe we can just do a little bit more. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Anyways, but something happened 7/8 of the way, and we were an hour from the summit, and we were the last ones on the mountain. Other people were way ahead of us. We'd lost time because of things. But what happened was, as we were like going up, the first group was coming down and they had summited. And when we were passing each other on the volcano, it was like they were like, there was some energy exchange that happened, because I think in many people's minds, I was never going to make it. Right. And so I remember like a couple of the people coming down were like, oh my God, you're almost there. And it was like this, like, you know, such this like excitement. And I had this moment where I like just connected eyes with one of the guys, and he was like all excited for me. And this lyrics to this song popped into my head that I had been telling my teenage daughter, you know, a couple months prior. She listened to Drake a lot. And one of the songs of Drake has, I can't remember his wife's name, but you know, she's on it saying, I didn't come this far just to come this far. Right. And I remember hearing it going, that's what I'm going to say on the volcano. Right. And I'd completely forgotten about it. But then when we locked eyes, I said, I didn't come this far just to come this far. And it was like this energy took over. Right. And suddenly I was like, I am summiting. Like, I don't even care if my partner wants to turn around. I'm doing this. And I know that I'm doing this. Right. And things started happening really fast at that point where I got my own guide, because once, you know, the guides are like paid to summit people. So they'd summited that group. And so one of them just hooked himself onto me, and he's like, okay, let's do it. Because if we miss that 1 hour window, we have to come down. And so he started like scampering up, and I was following him, and I was full of energy for the last hour. Right. And so we finally get to the summit, and we're waiting for, you know, my partner. And I'm sitting on the summit going like, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I did this. But more incredulous for me was the fact that I realized how my mind lied to me the whole time. And it was like, I can't do this. This is too hard. You know, like I'm not capable, right? But my body could do it. And I was fine. I had more, I could keep climbing, right? And that was the experience of understanding that the mind lies and the body tells you the truth, right? And so that was a huge realization for me of like how much power I have in my body, right? And then fast forward 4 days and I'm home. I'm back in Toronto, and I'm in my first meeting with my team. And I've been gone for 10 days. And within 15 minutes of that meeting, I am sucked back into this like just hopeless, like problems and this and that. And everyone's looking at me for answers. And I just remember thinking like, how is it that I just climbed this volcano and now I feel exactly as bad as I did before I left? Like no answers. I feel completely powerless. And then I had this thought of there is a solution here. It's just that you weren't willing to do the hard thing it takes to make that decision and go through it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then it was this realization of, I can do hard things. I climbed that volcano and I can make these hard decisions. And that's when things started to tumble. And I made initially the first series of decisions around my business. And then a month later, it was my marriage. And I ended a 22-year marriage a month later. Was when the clarity came. You know, the actual, you know, communication of that took, you know, more months. But it was a complete deconstruction, because so many things in my life had gotten out of alignment, and I wasn't willing like I felt like I didn't have the courage to make those decisions. And then suddenly I found the courage, right? And so I would say, you know, the last 2 years since I climbed that volcano were very, very difficult years, because I made these huge decisions that had serious consequences, right? But I also had this understanding of I trust myself and I trust that I know what's right for me, even though it's hard. And what's at stake here is a life that is alive versus a life that is not mine and that is, you know, numb, right? And part of what motivated my decision to do these hard things was, I very much love my mother and my parents, however flawed our relationships were. But my mother, at the end of her life, had not lived that life, right? And I remember thinking to myself, I never want my daughter or my kids to look back on my life and feel like I didn't make decisions that were, I didn't do these things because of whatever reasons, right? Like whatever excuses we give ourselves, but in the name of self-sacrifice, which is what my mother had always, it was always about self-sacrifice, right? We put ourselves last, our needs are last. And I wanted to not live that life. So, yeah, it's definitely a very courageous path.
Yes.
But, you asked me how I was doing. And honestly, the timing of this podcast episode couldn't be more perfect because I actually used to do a lot of podcast interviews. And the last one I did was right after I came back from my volcano climb before everything blew up.
Yeah.
And then they just stopped, like the invitations stopped coming. And I thought it was so interesting, right? Because I have been just dealing with this stuff. And now, as of like literally, well, yesterday, it's happening on a day to day basis, but like, the financial repercussions of, shutting down my business, there were repercussions, right, that I had to deal with. All of that were unknowns that are now knowns, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm basically, in a place now where I have freed myself, right? And all the things that scared me, all the what ifs, around my decisions are no longer what ifs.
Yeah.
They're like, that's what it is.
Yeah. I think a lot of people stand at that door
Yeah.
knowing they have to go through it,
Yeah.
guessing at how, whatever adjective you want to use, how bad or scary or desolate or lonely or amazing or beautiful it is on the other side.
Yeah.
Walking, I mean, in the span of a very short period of time, you walked away from your business, your marriage ended, two of your children left home.
Mhm.
Like that's a big portion of everything you experienced in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Were walking through those doors, was your expectation accurate of what was going to happen on the other side?
No, not at all.
What was right, what was wrong, what was different?
I mean, it wasn't accurate in the sense of all the things that I was scared of. Kind of like there's evidence of grace,
Mm,
right? Evidence that I'm being carried. So the community of people that actually was also one of the things that I had envisioned for myself with the Dr. Joe work, because I always had best friends. I always had really good girlfriends, but I didn't have a community of people. They were all separate relationships and they all had their own groups. And I remember feeling like, I don't really feel like I belong, right? And what's happened without even me really even seeing it unfold was I have this beautiful community of friends, like women we're all transforming at the same time, right? And so, I'm not doing this alone, right? And, there's just been so much beauty. And, well, I'll share something with you, which is, you know, the decision to end my marriage was very difficult because, it wasn't a situation of infidelity on either side. It was this very long, drawn out process of just feeling that I was not seen. We didn't fit, and it was very, very painful, but there was a comfort in in it too, right? And especially because it was a stable marriage with 3 kids and they had no idea. Like they didn't see us arguing, none of that, right? And I wasn't sure if I was going to be alone forever after that, right? And I wasn't sure if there was someone for me, right? And what ended up happening was I decided that, I needed to spend time by myself, right? I just needed to kind of go through it. And so that's what I did. I didn't, put myself out there in any way. I was really just learning to be alone because I'd never really been alone. I'd always gone from like boyfriend to boyfriend to boyfriend, and then I got married, right? And about 8 months into like the separation, I went to go visit a friend of mine who she had a sauna and we were like hanging out in her sauna and stuff. And she's like, I'm going to set you up with someone. And I was like, who? Right. And anyways, I had some resistance to it, especially after she kind of described, I was like, I don't know, Anyways, I just decided to say yes because it was like, it's an exercise in saying yes. You can check it off and say, like, I went out on a date and I went out on this date, and this was 9+ months ago. And I couldn't believe it. But like, I met my person on that date. And like, I never, like, I've heard these stories of people, right? But I never thought that would happen to me, right? And it was like I was caught, like the universe caught me. And I, do feel that I, in a sense, have been flying without a net. And I continue to fly without a net in many areas. I don't know what's next for me right now. And yet I do know what's next for me. I just don't know how it takes shape, right? And it's just this continuous believing and trusting in that if I just continue to make the decisions that feel aligned, that in one way, shape, or form, I might crash sometimes, but overall, I am safe,
Yeah.
right? And being willing to live that way is so new for me, right?
Yeah, it's always a leap of faith to follow your heart, always. And the more you do it, you're just gathering the evidence that you're okay, that you're in good hands.
Yeah,
And it takes practice. Like it's a practice of
it
not
really,
always doing what seems, supposedly the safe thing or the right thing or the thing that makes sense to other people.
right.
Um, Something came to mind as you were speaking. I was recently in a session with Michael Bungay Stainer, who I know you
Okay.
know.
Oh, he's climbing with
I know he did. um, he was guiding us through this practice, and he talked about your relationship with other people, and that there's like different levels. There's indifference, and then it goes up to like enthusiastic cheerleader, and then what you could consider the top level is to be an odd partner.
right.
And I think that when you find a way to be in the heart, it's like no longer sufficient just to have cheerleaders in your life.
Right.
And like if cheerleaders are great, they're
Yep.
great. But when you can find that heart connection where you're awed and in awe and feel adored in that way or admired, or neither of those are the right word, but then it's like the capacity that gives you becomes so infinite, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like you're living, it's a completely different frequency
Yeah.
from, good job, you did great
Right.
today.
Right. 100%.
And that's what I'm seeing in you as you talk about this person and talk about where you're at. It's like you're in a space of awe of
Yes.
what's unfolding in your life
Yes.
entirely.
I am. Like I
Do
would
you
never.
do you need to continue working? Like, do you need money now or
I do. Yeah. I
yeah,
need to, like I mean, I'm giving myself some grace because
yes.
I do feel that no matter how much healing work and how much meditation, like I have truly been in this state of like sustained kind of like, like pressure, like a pressure cooker for, I don't know, like, when did it start? When I had kids? Like, when it's
Right.
definitely started when the pandemic started and the business started to
Yeah.
fail, right? So 5 to 20 years,
Yeah.
right? And for the first time in my life, I feel like I need to take some time to just wake up in the morning and not feel like I have to do this, I have to do
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And I've never had that, you know?
I do know because I hadn't either.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we're on similar timelines, that 5 to 20 year
Yeah.
point. And I've said this before on another show, but this idea that, you know, the first half of this decade was like this mass Rubik's Cube, and like we all got shuffled around.
Yeah.
And those of us that are able to acknowledge that and accept it and be open to what comes, you know, we're going to rise higher than we ever thought possible, even if we have no idea where we're going. And the suffering is going to hit those that are doing with all their might for it to be back to what it was, because it's never going back. We're not going back as a species. Like the level
Yeah.
of consciousness
Right.
isn't diminishing. And it's having that trust and that faith. And if at all helpful, I too, in my own journey, trusted that space was being created for something.
Right.
And and though, you know, as entrepreneurs, we're like, we want our goals, we want our strategies, we want to know what we
Yeah.
can do to get to the point we want to get to.
Yeah.
And it's like learning just to trust that it will come, like the
Right.
answers will come.
Yeah.
And just being mindful not to create busyness to
Right.
feel of use and of service,
Right.
so that we maintain that space in the morning to have that idea pop in and be like, oh, that's unusual. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to look into today, and
Yeah.
see what path it takes.
Well, I was listening to your podcast interview with Catherine Farquharson just this morning because I know I've heard of her.
Yes. I'm like, you must know Catherine.
You know, I love what you guys are talking about in terms of, you know, the morning practice. Cause I too feel like, well, I have a morning routine, but then when she talks about a devotion, right?
Yeah.
There is a distinction, right? And, you know, I know that as even if I try and push the next thing forward, my body is saying no. Like I can't do this most simple things. Like, you know, I signed up for this 30-day video posting challenge on Instagram just as a thing, right? And I got to day 11 and I just can't. I can't do it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, part of me is like, why can't you do this thing? It's like, because my body just is saying, stop it.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I get it. And I spent many years, I'm almost at 3 years now, finding ways to like keep busy and feel
Right.
productive and like help
Right.
other people and do all this stuff. And it's taken this long for me to like really embrace what I know I want to be doing.
Right.
There are hard habits and conditioning that, especially, you know, given how you grew up,
Right.
you know, to do the right thing and work
Right.
hard and be,
Yeah.
you know, all of that. Like and you know, my childhood was not the same as yours, but any of us, I think, who become entrepreneurs, there's like these perfectionist tendencies. There's, I'll show them. There's, you know,
Right.
that whatever lights that fire, that is
Yeah.
really hard to be like, you can come back, just not yet. Like, just
Right.
sit over there for a little while. We gotta work this through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have like day to day?
Mhm.
Are you filling your days? Like you're feeling good day to day?
I am. You know, I mean, some days are hard. I
Yeah.
have to, right? Like some days are like, holy shit, what have I done and what am I going to do? And like, you know, there is definitely days where I feel a lot of fear, you
Yeah.
know? And that's why it's good to have people who have your back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's this saying in 12 step, which I think is so, you know, wise, which is, you know, we get better because we're not all sick on the same day.
Right.
Yeah. It applies to everything.
I listened to a show recently. I can send you the link. We can put it in the show notes too. But it was a doctor who talked about what happens to a woman's brain between the ages of 45 and 55.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Fascinating. And one of the things that happens is rewiring as our reproductive organs shut down, where women finally start asking for the first time in their life, what is it that I want?
Right. Wow.
And And
So
after I heard that, like I get goosebumps again just saying it. I'm like, that's exactly what it is.
yeah. Yeah.
And then it's trusting the journey to.
Okay, I want to definitely
I will.
hear that.
I will send it to you. Is there anything else that you would like to or feel like you need to share to have this feel complete?
Huh. No, not at this point. No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just been, I'm so happy that you threw away the script and it just went where it went, you know?
Yeah, I'm done preparing for them because I mean, things come up. I have a natural curiosity. Which is how this came up in the first place. And I really just wanted to hear people's journey because I said this earlier, as entrepreneurs, like we celebrate all the highlights. It's not an easy path.
No, not. It's definitely a courageous path.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not that we can be, I'm not really feeling this anymore. I'm going to go apply for a different job.
Right.
There isn't the same freedom, or we want to allow ourselves that kind of freedom to do so.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you so much for making the time and sharing so openly. You are living a courageous life. You're very inspiring. I'm grateful to know you.
Oh, well, same here. I'm so glad we connected and thank you. This was truly feels like I feel that the timing of this is so perfect and it's such an honor. And I love your podcast. I think you're doing such a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening through to the end. As always, you can find all the details and links to things we talked about in our show notes. Go to courageouspivot.com and click on this episode for all of the goodies. And of course, if you subscribe to the show, it gets emailed right to you. So that's also awesome. Do that while you're there. Thank you again for listening, for being here, for being part of this community. And I just kindly ask for 2 little favors today. 1, send this episode to a friend who you think will gain at least 1 little nugget of wisdom that can impact their life positively. And 2, leave a comment, leave a review, wherever you are actually listening to the show. That also helps other people find it. And that's really the whole goal here, is to spread the word of what it means and what it takes to live a courageous life. Because that, my friends, is what the world needs. All of us living from the heart, building up that frequency and that resonance, bringing joy, bringing inspiration, and living in a way that is really in alignment with our souls as we stand today and who we're becoming tomorrow. Thank you as always for listening, and we'll connect again next week. Have a great rest of your day.